being able to grow it and still show up to all the competitions and show up to the market and say, we are actively beating some of the largest producers in whiskey and or spirits in the world is cool.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And
Yeah.
I'm even like still trying to settle into that notion that that's what we've done.
Leo here, your host of the Building Bellingham podcast, and thanks for stopping by the studio. Pour a glass of whiskey or local beer, take a sip, kick those feet up. We're going to dive into what it means to be a business owner, what it means to be a member of this Bellingham and Whatcom County community, and what it means to find peace and balance while running a badass, high-octane, local, iconic business. Let's jump in.
Well, Jesse, welcome to the studio. This is episode 7 of season 5. Really excited to have you in the studio to share the story about Doc Swinson's and Distiller's Way, but mainly Doc Swinson's because this is one of my favorite whiskeys. And I just over the last 5 years, I happen to be in that age demographic where you start going, life's hard. I need something a little bit more strong. And then you start drinking whiskey. And I found you guys at Hagen in the local section. I got, drawn to the label, drawn to the brand, tried it and was like, hot damn, this is good. And then the rest is history. We did a little whiskey tasting last week, and I love your brand. I love what you make. Excited to share your story.
Gosh, Leo, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it's been really fun, like trying to find more community connections locally, like within our, within 100 miles of our own business. Something we haven't really focused on that we're trying to do more of actually is getting more involved in the community, which has been really fun.
It's just really exciting to find somebody and find a company that's here locally that has crushed it on such a national and world scale. But you're right here in Whatcom County, you're in Ferndale.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Which nobody so for example, when I'm out in market and, people are like, oh, I've heard of Doc Swinson's, and people always ask the same question, where are you from? And I always say Ferndale. First of all, nobody knows where Ferndale is outside of here. Let's be honest. Occasionally, sure. But overall, no, nobody knows. Bellingham even is difficult, right? Now, Seattle is what I usually tell people, right? Because they're like, okay, I get where Seattle is because there's no other city in the world named Seattle. Right. And I think that's really interesting because nobody expects that, right? Nobody thinks that some whiskey blending company in the Pacific Northwest is beating some of the biggest whiskey houses in competitions in the world, which is kind of crazy. And to better that, it's with sometimes their own juice. That is my base, right?
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because we talked last week about the difference between distilling and blending. And I know it's like 101. Okay, distilling is the process of creating, blending is the process. It's like creating the canvas and then painting on the canvas is kind of the way that I've looked at it after you gave us that tour.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me a little bit more about where people get most of the whiskey that's distilled and then the process from there.
Sure, certainly. So I think there's a few things where you could define this from. So a lot of people have a negative connotation around the word blending now, and that's because of a specific product that's designated by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Tax Trade Bureau, the TTB, and that's blended whiskey. And that's what maybe your dad or your grandpa drank, and what is a blend of whiskeys and what's called neutral spirit. So that's a whole nother category. Now, that's not what we're talking about. We don't do that. We blend whiskeys, which is what every American whiskey house or Scottish whiskey distiller does as well, or Irish whiskey distiller does, which is taking in unique profiles from different casks, for example, or different mash bills, or even different distilleries, blending them together to make a unique profile of them. That's what I focus on. So that's what we do. And what that means is we don't focus on distillation as being the primary aspect of our business, right? I rely on other distillers from around the country, work with them because they're extremely talented at what they do. They've been doing it for 100 years, 200 years even. And I take those different profiles and then rearrange them in a way, like it's a puzzle, right? And create something completely unique and new out of them. I think that's really the most interesting thing about what I do is blending whiskey. It's one of the largest growing aspects of the industry. And it's also what some of the most well-known brands in the world do. They truly blend whiskeys.
When we went on that tour, you were explaining that to have a distillery is this incredibly massive operation. And you guys are a pretty big operation. Like your facilities are large.
Yes.
But you were saying it's bigger than that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So in most cases, about 98% of all American whiskeys come from a handful of distilleries in the United States, right? These distilleries they're gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but they also kind of look like petrol processing plants. These are huge operations. And that's also how you can have the economy of scale to hit a price point that makes sense on the shelf, right? If we were to do what we do the same way in our own facilities, even though we have large facilities, our bottle price would be easily twice the price. So here's the thing is I get to rely on other producers with the knowledge that they have to focus on consistency and distillation, meaning processing grains, dealing with fermentation, and distillation. Now, the majority of the profiles out of your or out of your overall whiskey bottle is going to come from the cask itself. So my focus is less on distillation. Now, I have a background in that, but my real focus is on maturation, which is what most of the world actually focuses on as far as what makes a quality profile. That's, I think, what matters the most, is maturation. So how long has that been a barrel? What type of barrels? Which barrels get put together to make a quality whiskey?
Yeah. And you just talked a little bit about your history and your background in distillation. Yeah. How did you get into this world of spirits and specifically whiskey? Because you have a background with some local companies, and there is another arm to the business that you guys run. Tell me a little bit more about you and that journey.
It's been a long journey. When I was about 7 years old, to really back it up, right? I had my own root beer brand, and I would make my own concoctions, and we'd actually bottle hundreds and hundreds of bottles per year and kind of move them forward. I'm from Whidbey Island originally. My parents were really into playing around with those kind of profiles. They taught me a lot about brewing, vintning, and making liqueurs as a kid. So I think it was a natural course for me as I grew up. This is something you do kind of adjacent to what your family does, right? Mm-hmm. And they didn't do it on a commercial level. They just did it for fun. So I wanted to take it to the next level. And when I was at college, I already had a passion for distillation sciences. That had just happened to be about 2012 when the craft industry was starting to boom in the United States. We went from basically I think it's less than 20 distilleries, upwards of, I think over 1,000.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of growth in that region.
A little bit. Yeah. Not quite like wineries or breweries, but we're still there. So I had an opportunity when I was at college to look for, I needed a job, right? In a nutshell. And there was a couple distilleries opening up locally here in Whatcom County, and I happened to get a job at one of them. And against all odds, right? I didn't have a background truly in distillation or anything like that. I just happened to be probably the cheapest option.
Yeah.
The most moldable option, right? Because I was young, I was still in college. It worked out really well with the family that I ended up working for. And that was Bellwood Acres.
Yeah.
Right?
Big company.
Absolutely. Yes. Whatcom County. Absolutely. And the neat thing was I kind of thought I'd be hired and I get to learn from a distiller, right? Well, the reality is there wasn't that many in the country, almost none, in fact, right? Other than for big companies. And they weren't probably going to leave their job to go work for a small operation. And the people that owned Bellwood Acres at the time, they were busy with the farm. Yeah. So they essentially gave me the keys to their kingdom and said, here, figure this out. This is what we're going to keep shoving at you every single week to figure out what you can do. I had some of the access to the best stills in the country for what you could find on the West Coast at the period of time. Did really well distilling brandies. And then through that process, I got to learn from other master distillers from around the world because we're actually a pretty small group of people. And I think that was really neat. And that's kind of what expanded my understanding and my knowledge of what I actually do and starting applying that to American whiskeys, which came a few years later.
It's interesting too, Jesse, because you do have a background in it. This started a long time before you got a formal got formally Absolutely. Into it. And so I always, because I didn't finish college. And so I'm a big proponent of your education starts when you get into something, right? Not necessarily when you officially start. And you have to start somewhere too. The best of any industry don't just start by having all these certifications and all, most stories don't happen that way.
No.
Anyways, I just wanted to make that quick side note on that's it's amazing when a business owner will take a chance like that on someone that they know has the potential to do it, but doesn't necessarily have all these, formal fill in the blank certifications, all the things. So that's where you got your start.
Yeah, absolutely. I have 0 certifications in what I do.
I love that.
I don't even have a degree in the background. I'm not a chemist.
What is do you have a degree, by the way?
Yeah, absolutely. I doubled in communications and economics.
That was
something totally outside of what I even do.
But it does transfer into, it's very useful. Yeah. It's very useful. The communications part, economics for sure.
Yep.
So anyways, so you're doing this, and then there's some pivot point where you get in touch with the Distiller's Way guys, and tell me about how that progressed.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, when I was 22, I did exceptionally well in an international gin competition. In fact, I won the competition, which is kind of crazy. This is when, for example, even Hendrix was top of the charts at the time. Now, the world's changed in the last 12 years or so, but this was a pretty big thing to win. One of the biggest competitions in the world. A 22-year-old kid won that competition. That's nuts. From a little distillery.
Did you expect to win?
No. I knew we would do well. I truly believe in the products they produce. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today, to be honest.
Yeah.
You probably would have picked that bottle off of Hagen shelf and said, this is fine whiskey, or maybe it's bad. Who knows? But you obviously liked it.
Yes,
right?
A lot.
And that's been the case across the board, nationally and even into international markets as well. Basically, when I was around 22 and a half, 23 years old, I was even looking at moving outside of the industry because I wanted to expand my knowledge. So either I had to move to Kentucky, move to Europe, which Sounds great too.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, both
Right?
both sound good.
Exactly. But once again, I didn't have a background in it. Most of the people in my industry at the time in particular are either family owned operations.
Yep.
Or they have pedigree.
Yep.
Right. Or they're PhD chemists. There's usually the three options that you have.
You're now an honorary PhD chemist.
From somebody will hopefully maybe I'll get there.
You have a building Bellingham degree in whiskey blending.
I love
So
it. I'm going to use that in the future, by the way.
absolutely, they can call me as a reference.
I'm going to call up the Beam Suntory School of Distillation in Kentucky and say, can I just have this?
Yeah,
They
just
might do it.
yeah, just like we got deemed worthy of this via the Building Bellingham pod. Just say Building Bellingham podcast really fast.
Oh, and they'll be like, good, sounds good.
Good. Sounds really exclusive and rare and all these things. Yeah.
One day, hey, you could truly
Call
I
on
will
me.
drop that. The next time that actually happens, so there's an opportunity, I'm just gonna say, and I think Bellingham, Building Bellingham podcast. So
Mhm.
they'll be like, oh,
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's like right in front of the Joe Rogan podcast. Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, actually, from before, or
Yeah, that's what I was
about it.
that was
I'm
what-
actually here.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan hasn't invited me around.
No, he couldn't get you,
Too expensive.
but you have been on it.
I haven't.
No,
That has.
sorry. Let's just take a step back on that. The
Here's
whiskey.
tangent.
The whiskey has, and we had talked about this, and I'm actually going to pour a little bit while you tell this story.
We totally should.
We're going to start with the straight bourbon whiskey, and
Yep.
this is on the shelf at Hagen. Where else can people find this?
As far as Washington State goes, Total Wine & More, Bevmo, Hagen, and then several dozen other small shops. The major thing that we always like to say, if you can't find the one you're looking for,
Solid. Do you want more? Less?
yeah, no, it's perfect.
Okay.
It's been a big day of blending, to be honest. So,
You've seen enough of it. Yeah. Perfect. How did that come to be? Because that's a funny story.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So if you look up anything about this particular episode, you just scrum for the episode, which is I think is one of my favorite parts about it.
When you say scrub for the episode, tell me what does
There's
that
no
mean?
history with existing anymore unless you go into the Wayback Machine, or you were there for about a month.
You heard it, and you're like,
I saw it.
ding, ding, ding,
That's the
ding.
best part.
Yeah.
So did a dozen other people, several hundred other people. We even have the stats to show like our website. It's skyrocketed
Yeah.
within that week.
So who brought it on the show?
Sanjay Gupta.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How did Sanjay Gupta know about your whiskey?
Turns out he picked it up in Atlanta at a store. It appealed to him. So
Yeah.
Doc Swinson's triple cask, bourbon finished in cognac and sherry cask, not the one we're drinking now, but the one we'll be drinking next,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Was sitting on a shelf in Atlanta. And this was for to my knowledge, the most watched or listened to podcast of Joe Rogan's of all time. That's huge.
It's a big deal. He's done like what, 10,000 episodes?
It's a ridiculous number.
He does them like every day.
Started back when I was like a little kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Fear Factor days.
I remember Fear Factor.
So he found it on a shelf in a
Down on
store.
the shelf. Both Sanjay Gupta and Joe Rogan got together to have a podcast about vaccines, more or less,
Yep.
and how COVID's doing, right? Which was a juicy podcast.
Yeah.
Right. They were a little bit on the opposite ends of certain spectrum. And the idea, I think, more or less was Sanjay Gupta walked in with a bottle of whiskey. They typically drink on this show. How do you bury the hatchet? How do you have a civil conversation over some good whiskey?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we all can agree with that.
I agree.
Sanjay Gupta brought a bottle of Doc Swinson's triple cast, the second one in line here, on the show. They had their conversation. And twice in that episode, they stopped. Joe Rogan stopped and said, holy shit, this is good whiskey. And they talked about it twice on this episode.
I love that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
This is nothing new. We didn't pay for it. We couldn't afford it, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's a little expensive.
A little bit.
Yeah.
This is expensive too, though.
I'll write you the check later. Anyways, I think it was a funny story. And so basically what happened is all of a sudden our internet views like flew through the roof for like our website, our Instagram, everything flew through the roof, right? Now, one of the largest sponsors of Joe Rogan is Secret 7. Eventually it got scrubbed from the episode. So there's no history of it, at least as far as if you were just to look at that one episode, the most watched and or listened to episode of Joe Rogan, it's not there anymore. It doesn't exist.
But you know it does.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it. It's been
Yeah.
recorded. You can go into the Wayback Machine and actually find it.
Yeah.
It exists.
Let's talk a little bit about the branding and the marketing, because this is an example of some sort of kind of serendipitous viral moment.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a great thing, but it's not something to be expected. But what you've done with the branding and the way that you've presented it, and the passion and the knowledge, and you getting out there and that person that can explain what you're doing and show your passion behind it, that goes a long way.
Certainly.
So tell me a little bit more about, the more intentional marketing, because that was like, it's very serendipitous, right?
I love the term intentional marketing. That's something I think we're still trying to figure out, to be honest.
I think everybody is.
Literally,
Yeah.
it's how do you always pivot, right?
Well, Tiffany knows, and Dan knows.
Yes, Dan absolutely knows. Dan's
Yeah.
been with us from the get-go, so shout out to Joyco there.
Yeah.
No, so Doc Swinson's came out a little bit later. We started our company in 2014, primarily focusing on private label manufacturing, right?
Yep.
So developing brands for other companies,
Yep.
right? Box store chains, local retailers, chain groups, things like that. So whatever you wanted to make, you could come to us, for example, say, hey, I'm looking to produce, a bourbon, whatever. It could be raspberry flavoring, it could be vodka, you name it. Worked on projects all over the world, from RTDs, so canned seltzers kind of stuff, before canned seltzers were really cool.
Right.
Now they're really cool. And my gosh, I wish I just made some of my own brands of that stuff, because it would have been a different story.
They're like, that stuff's just sparkling water. Yeah.
No, because our focus was like, who are we going to partner with to actually do the retail side of things,
Yep.
right? That's difficult. People have to trust in that, right? They have to see that there's value in it themselves. Now, a lot of people had seen value in that. Now they are really seeing value in it, but getting people to pull the trigger is a different story.
Right.
I think that's something that's really interesting. Is we started with a relatively small amount of capital, worked on just slowly adding to our bottom line,
Yep.
building up, buying barrels, and eventually through this entire process of dealing with these large chain groups across the country, we rolled capital into our own products.
Yeah. Makes
Things that
sense.
we really wanted to do. We all at the company, which there's only a few of us, there's 3 of us that mainly run daily operations, and 2 investors, all Whatcom County people, was we like bourbon. What kind of mark can we do on American whiskey? And that's where Doc Swinson really came from.
I love that. So it was like and it still is a big part of your company, Distiller's Way.
Yeah,
But it was this thing that was a necessity. It was something that needed to happen. There was a hole in the market for it. You guys knew you could do it. You had the backgrounds to do it, but you saw it as like, this is something that we can do to get to the place that we get to be more creative, and we get to completely unleash our passion for this thing that we all like to drink or do. And
this is exactly it. I think Steve Main, head of our sales, he says all the time, is like, and it is true. The reality is we needed to keep me entertained. I used to work on all sorts of different flavored whiskeys, flavored vodkas. Those are great. That's fine. There's a market for it. They're fun. I have a good time creating them because it's a different challenge.
Yep.
But the thing where my heart really is actually in producing these kind of products, which is challenging American whiskey in a way, because most of what I do is finishing them in casks from all over the world.
Yeah.
So I'm taking American bourbon and finishing them in Pinot de Chiron, Cognac, Armagnac. We do.
I saw a lot of barrels.
Flavors. Yeah, there's a lot of different things going there. Tawny port.
Some that look like they came off a Blackbeard ship, and some that were like brand new, and all these different. Just incredible facility.
As much as Blackbeard ship. Yeah.
So just real quick, before we jump back into that, I'm going to taste this. The proper way to taste this, you told me this the other day, and just for our listeners, is a little bit on the tongue, let it roll back.
Yeah, so I think the first way to start really tasting whiskey is to kind of understand what's going on. This isn't a scary thing. This should be a really enjoyable thing to do, for the record. I think one of the things that I got taught to when I was a kid, just because I happened to have access when I was young to a Grand Sommelier, was simply enjoy yourself. Enjoy yourself and be honest with what you're trying. It doesn't have to be right, because the reality is we all have different olfactory systems. We're going to perceive things a little bit differently. So don't be afraid if somebody says, this smells like, whatever, peaches, and you don't smell peaches. Don't worry about that. Like, don't let that change your mind.
Right.
Go into it for you. This is a you thing.
So like suggestive bias, is that the word for it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you tell, I guarantee my brain would probably be primed to think whatever you told me that you taste or what you were thinking when you created it.
Yeah. When we first started the company and I met my business partners, I literally said, think bananas. And then everybody thinks bananas. That's the whole joke. Like if I said this smells like bananas, you'd probably like, oh, I totally pick up on that. Because
I'll pick it up. Yeah.
You might not want to offend me, or you might be like, oh, I think that's what it is, because I don't really know. You don't really know what you're tasting.
Yeah.
It might be bananas. To be fair, that's actually a pretty common note in whiskey, but it's not the first one you should go with. In most cases, nobody says bananas about whiskey.
Yeah.
Unless it's Jack Daniels.
I'm just going to say this tastes like bananas. Don't worry. I'm not worried about offending, because the whiskey's delicious.
Exactly.
I'm more in the second category, and I think a lot of our listeners and the group that came through for the tour, I think a lot of us, besides probably Jesse and Jason, are definitely in that category of like, I like whiskey. I'm getting to know it better. Yeah. I know what I like and I don't like, but the nuances are tougher for me.
Honestly, they can be tough for me too. It is difficult to go back and forth between different blends and come up with what I would say is like a pretty definitive flavor profile. Because once again, I'll try it today, I might think differently tomorrow. And a lot of that has to do with, did I sleep well? What did I eat this morning? There's a lot of different, am I tired? Like there's a lot of different characteristics that play into that. Did I just drink a lot of water? Did I just drink coffee? All that makes a difference. But I think make it simpler is sit back, grab your glass,
check,
put a nice healthy pour in there. And once again, glassware does make a difference. So what kind of have a rocks glass? It's going to be too much.
What kind of glasses? What are these called technically?
These are called Glencairns.
Yep.
So Glencairn Crystal is from Scotland. It's like the official tasting glass of the whiskey world.
Yep.
More or less, primarily because of Scotch. It happens to work extremely well for American whiskey as well, and Japanese whiskey, etc.
And it's the shape.
It's the shape. The shape makes it different. And depending on what you're looking for in your whiskey, the shape is going to present that profile. Just like I think Whatcom County would probably appreciate this. Beer.
What makes you think that about Whatcom County?
I don't know.
Do we have enough breweries here, or like what's?
I've heard there's more opening, which is great, which is cool, right?
Yes.
It's experimentation and something different. Any brewer is going to tell you like this particular shape of glass is going to accentuate these profiles.
Yeah.
Right. Whiskey is no different. Treat it like that. Treat it like wine, but don't at the same time. What you do with wine? Every time I've ever seen somebody grab a glass,
the shake,
and they swirl it really fast. Don't do that with whiskey.
I'm not doing it.
Don't do it. You can, but what you should do is there's a way to fix it.
Yep.
And it takes a few seconds. But what we really want to do is pour the whiskey in the glass, let it hang on the glass for a few seconds, maybe a minute or two. And then you're going to pick it up and you're going to put it up to your mouth. And what you're going to do is allow yourself to breathe through your mouth and your nose at the same time. Now it sounds silly, but it's actually really easy to achieve. Basically, crack your mouth a little bit and breathe in. Don't shove your nose in a glass. Because what happens is you have too many volatile alcohols, right, that are evaporating really quickly. And that's the difference between whiskey and wine in a nutshell. Is wine needs oxidation, so that's why you swirl it. You expose more surface area to oxygen, which is going to evaporate it quicker. Whiskey is a much higher alcohol content. You don't need that. It's already doing it naturally just by sitting here.
I can smell it coming up.
Exactly. You could literally be like across the room. I don't know. But you could be across the room and be like, oh, that smells like caramel and vanilla.
No, they say that smells like normal Leo. Yeah.
First, you want to like approach it that way. You want to go into it kind of delicately, pick up on a couple profiles, take a second, look away, and go back.
Okay.
Is it alcohol? Is it wood?
I smell smoky peanut butter, like light peanut butter.
Peanut is a very normal tasting note.
So I'm just a basic whiskey drinker.
No, but that's the thing is most of us actually are. That's the reality. It's not that we have to be super complex. I think overall, when you get you dive too deep into it, you kind of ruin the fun in actually tasting things.
Yep.
People ask me all the time, what makes a good whiskey? And I said, do you like it or not? Like, let's be as simple as it comes down to. If you don't like it, that's great. Let's move on to something else.
Yep.
Doesn't mean you're wrong. It's just, do you don't like it for you? So this is the first mark of any blend I create is, do you like it or not? If I can say yes, I could keep diving. If I say no, I need to change direction.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what did I do wrong?
Choose your own adventure book. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the first step because the reality, most of us are probably relatively similar. Some of us just might be able to deeply dive a little bit further, right? So anyways, after you get your nose going, smell some of that. And then what you're going to do is just put a little bit on the end of your tongue and then light it, like cover your tongue, swish it backwards, right? Then you're going to chew. You just want to swallow. So you don't want to swallow it right away. You want to chew on it because that's going to allow a little more oxygen to get in contact with the whiskey. And what that's going to do is actually expose more of those profiles.
I like it. That's step one, right?
Step one.
I like it
or not.
I do like it.
Yep.
Get more smoky notes. And honestly, the banana conversation, it's hilarious, but like
but it works.
But it works. And instantly I smell banana. And I've never thought that in my 400 years drinking whiskey.
There's a lot of different ways you can approach this. And just being honest about what kind of you're picking up in that moment, I think is the most important thing about tasting whiskeys. Do you like it or not? Yes or no? If you want to dive deeper, let's talk about flavor profiles, right? Which, like you said, I think you said smoky peanut butter.
Smoky peanut butter. Totally. And I love peanut butter. So I primed myself on that one. I was like, please taste like peanut butter. Please taste like peanut butter.
Exactly. So that's the rich power suggestion, right?
Yeah.
More often than not.
Self-suggestion there. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is delicious. And so if someone were to be we're just using Hagen because that's where my caveman brain found it. What does this one cost in store?
Okay, so Session Blend, Doc Swinson Session Blend has a little blue label on the bottom. It's 90 proof. The whole purpose of this blend was really to focus towards people who are just trying to get into whiskeys, bold enough to showcase a little bit more than something that's at a lower proof point. And it's also bold enough to hold up in a cocktail. It was really designed in mind with actually local bars, which is cool.
Which ones?
Jack's.
Oh my God, it's so delicious.
Love them. Does this work in standard American cocktails? What I mean by standard American cocktails are an old fashioned, a Manhattan, and a sour, traditional sour.
Yeah.
Right. Not just maybe what you get at a college bar, which this would still work in that. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
It's 40.
I don't know. I don't think I would appreciate it. And I don't think I could have afforded it in college.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. But now it's all about quality over quantity.
Exactly.
Or it's about quality in quantity now, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that was the whole idea is we wanted to make something that's approachable. It's a 5-year age statement.
Yep.
Which so the rule of thumb in American whiskey in general is $10 per year.
Okay.
That's the general rule of thumb. So this is a 5-year age statement on this bottle. You can get it at Hagen. It's $39.99 plus tax. Sorry, Washington, we're a little expensive.
Yep.
It's just what it is. It's a solid buy compared to everything else on the shelf there for the same price point. That was the idea. can we best what we can for our price point while keeping it a really nice edge for cocktails and people who just like bourbon that don't necessarily like cask strength bourbons.
Yep.
We're pretty famous for making cask strength whiskeys, so over 100 proof. So this was a fun experiment in deciding, okay, let's make something for something for the masses. That's the idea, right?
The daily
People's
drinker.
bourbon, the daily drinker.
Yep.
At a really good price point for what it is.
Yep. And that was one thought that I did have was sometimes I do feel like, at least for me as the less educated whisketeer here, I found myself always capping out at like $70 or $80. Like,
Totally.
And I'm not like drinking this in a weekend. I'm like, this is lasting me a while. This is hanging out, maybe having a celebratory drink, whatever it may be. Sometimes I go, that's just a name. When it gets up over like well up into the hundreds and hundreds, the caveat is I had some of your more expensive whiskey, and it's not just a name. It packs a punch. It totally is in alignment with what you're charging for it. But this had been my experience buying whiskey is like, I think this is my limit unless I find one company, which I have, that I feel like really does it all well. And it's not just like this has just been aged longer, but it's not necessarily better. You know what I mean?
One, I appreciate it. Thank you. And two, I'm not surprised, honestly, and not to just toot my own horn here, but we have done well in that category. That was the whole idea. And I have to give like my hats off to my CFO, who's like, no, we're going to maintain prices for everybody. In general, the majority of our releases, probably 95% of everything we put on the market is below $100.
Yep.
Right. Most of them are in that like $55 to $70 range. Yep. This can be our higher range. And once in a blue moon, we put something out that has an extraordinary age statement on it, 16, 17, 18 years. And that's, a lot more expensive, but there are only going to be a few hundred bottles in existence across the entire country.
And those are for like the Jasons and the Jessies that are like, they're looking for that thing they can't find in the store.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what that's for. But for most of us, we just want to be able to find a really high quality whiskey for a really good price point. And the goal was we all wanted to be able to go home or to the grocery store and buy our own whiskey.
Yep.
Because that's silly to have to pay $200 to $400 for a bottle of whiskey. You really shouldn't have, except in extreme cases where it's a really limited, like you will never find this else in the world. And it's actually really good. But to that point, I mean, I've tried lots of whiskeys out there that are absolutely wonderful, totally deserve the price point, and whiskeys that are 2 or 3 times the price than they ever should have been.
Yep.
That happens all the time. And we just hope that doesn't make a bad name for whiskey. It does happen.
But it's not on you. It's you're focusing on your vision, which is to do exactly what you just said.
Exactly.
And I think that that's something that myself and a lot of other people that drink whiskey in any capacity are looking for. So I appreciate you that being the vision of this company.
It is. I think that's representative of where we're also from. The reality is we all want to enjoy what we each create, right?
Absolutely.
We are more of a community, I think, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Let's go back a little bit from the conception of this business.
Yep.
To figuring out how to get this into stores, to expanding, to growing, to trade shows. Like let's use that economics degree and let's talk a little, like, how did that happen?
I mean, I'll be the first person to say that is less my business than my business partners.
Yeah.
They are the primary people that I trust in to be able to move this product into markets across the country.
Yeah.
Now I take a piece of that and I say, this is what I would do. This is what I'm gathering as far as data goes. But I think that's the neat thing is there is technically 4 of us now that run as equals for daily operations. And we all have very different backgrounds, right? Accounting, sales, physics, communications and chemistry, more or less, right? Yep. And we get to mingle those 3 things together and say, this is how we would target the market. But overall, the majority of what I do for my company is less on the sales side directly to different markets and primarily on R&D and brand development. That's what I really focus in. So I don't know if I have the best answer for saying this is how I navigate this, but I can tell you this. It's difficult, and the best option would be to start with 10 times as much capital.
Yep.
Like any business. How do you do anything? You start with 100 million to make 10 million. That's the whole joke, right?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, that is the best way you can navigate any business. And we're right there with you.
Well, we need $100 million right now.
Of course.
This is the only way we can continue our operation is if we have $100 million in the bank. So,
and we'll see you in the Caribbean, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I'll be putting on a Fire Fest, festival with it.
Still worked, right?
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Anyways. But yeah, it's a really interesting. You talked about starting you guys started the business with not a lot of capital, and I think one thing that I see, whether it's on Shark Tank or when I'm talking to other entrepreneurs, is they're like, I need X amount of dollars to start this business, and there's validity just some of that, like equipment, like there's some basic startup costs. But what I'm always fascinated by and I'm in complete admiration by is business owners and operators that have figured out a way to bootstrap it and focused on the thing that matters most, which is that you're betting on yourselves.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're doing. We're still betting on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, every day. And to your point, we have bootstrapped it, right? We started our company with a 3,000 square foot building, including our office, our production zone that was bottling, that was blending everything. Very little capital. And we landed some extremely large contracts. Some that was luck, some of it was being in the right place at the right time, and we knew where we needed to go, right? So investing the capital in the right places helped us get where we are today.
Yeah.
We've expanded that from 3,000 square foot to just under 20,000 square foot, plus storage in Indiana for about 3,000 barrels, which is not small.
Yeah.
That dwarfs what we have in facilities here in the north, in Whatcom County, right? And the only reason why I do that is because we want that climate zone on our barrels. So everybody understands why we keep barrels in the Midwest, is because they will still give us the profiles we're looking for in a bourbon to be the base profile of what we're going to do once we move those bourbon barrels full still to our location. Being flexible is another thing. We're an incredibly flexible company. We jump and pivot a lot when it comes to what we need to do to actually keep reinvesting in capital into our business. That's what we have done. I mean, for the most part, we're all here to make it or not make it together, which is, I think, an interesting testament to anybody that starts a business. You're in it because you believe in yourselves. To your point, you're betting on yourselves. We are betting on ourselves to hopefully get there. And what I mean by get there is have the capital to do a lot more and be a lot more free about what we're doing than what we currently are. Right now, there's a lot of hard decisions. I think that's something else that really sets us up apart from a lot of our competitors. I'm not saying a lot of our competitors don't do that, but a lot of our competitors have backers that are in the 40, 50, 100, $200 million range, no problem. What we're doing it with is like a couple percent of that at best.
Yeah.
Being able to grow it and still show up to all the competitions and show up to the market and say, we are actively beating some of the largest producers in whiskey and or spirits in the world is cool.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And I'm even like still trying to settle into that notion that that's what we've done. Because the reality is I'm just doing what I like doing. That's really what our company is about. Right? We have that freedom within reason.
Hey everyone, it's Tiffany. The Building Bellingham podcast is an arm of the Bellingham Real Estate Company, Bellingham's newest real estate brokerage. We're a high-energy, 5-star group of agents and admin that specialize in home sales right here in Bellingham, and our office is located on Meridian Street. Whenever you have questions about the local real estate market or your home's value, don't hesitate to reach out. All right, back to the show.
Going back into the investment part, I think a lot of people look at their business as a profit monster. Like if it's not a profit monster at the beginning or at year 5 or whatever it is, they feel like it's failing if they're not taking all this money from their business. But you guys have like taken this campfire and like added a little bit more wood here, added a little bit more wood, add a little bit more wood, keep putting, whatever you can into the fire, and still obviously have created livable wages for yourselves and your employees and all of the above. But like, can you explain a little bit more about that mindset of going, God, I'd love to take, like we just had this huge purchase order. I'd love to take my profit from this. I'd love to take X amount of dollars from this, but I'm just going to roll it back into the business.
It's not easy. I think that's the easiest way to say it, really. It's not easy.
Kind of painful, right?
It's incredibly painful, actually, because on one notion, I could look at this and say we started with, some private label contracts that has helped pay the bills, covered our nut, so to speak, and added a little bit on top, which gave us the ability to first buy those 45 barrels, those 50 barrels, those 100 barrels, which then we pulled profit from. We have to process stuff. Keep in mind, whiskey takes years to mature. Whiskey takes years to put in a bottle, right? So we take this limited amount of cash that we have as profit, roll it back into buying more barrels. We sit on those barrels for a number of years, roll it back, and we just keep doing that process over and over again. We've gone from, on one side of that coin, we've gone from about 10 barrels, which is what we started with, to over 3,000 barrels, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Those barrels are not cheap. What does it cost more than anything? What
is like a low cost barrel versus a like vintage Blackbeard barrel cost?
A new barrel, you're looking at around $1,000 a barrel.
Yeah.
New, meaning fresh whiskey off the still, put into a barrel. You do not want to put this in a bottle. That was cool maybe 10, 12 years ago. It's not cool today.
Yeah.
Dude, it's not that great. But you need 3, 4, 5, 6 years on top of that. Those barrels, on the flip side, if you were to go out and say source those barrels, you're probably going to pay closer to $3,000 or $4,000. It's expensive. So moving on one side of the coin, if we say we started with about 10 barrels, which is what we did, that was the initial barrels we ever released, was 10 barrels. And then moving towards thousands of barrels, not every year, but in inventory, right? That's a huge increase in what we've done for work or business, right? That's massive. Now, on the flip side is, yeah, do we pull more profit from it? No. I think that's the biggest beast to handle, right? Is we have to keep putting it into something that might pay off later. So we are overall staving off, I think, what we could pull from the business in order to sustain that business as a legacy. Does that make sense?
Totally.
We're trying to keep rolling it in because we want this to last for a long time. If we really wanted to, we just sell every single one of the barrels and walk away. And we could probably all walk away with, a nice payout. And that payout would mean I'd probably have to go back to work in about 10 years or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's the reality. I'm only 32. I got a long ways to go. So I don't know if that answers your question particularly well, but
it does. It answers my question very well. Yeah.
It is painful because there are times when I walk in the office, I'm like, my gosh, why can't somebody just walk in here and say, I'll take this company off your hands for a price?
I think that if you're not feeling that way about a business that you own or are a part of, you're not pushing yourself enough. And you're not uncomfortable enough. And I think that there's nothing wrong. And we've learned this here with our company, not to talk about us, but
no, it's good to communicate about these things. I think it's something we should do more, frankly, as far as community goes.
Yeah. I think that if you're not uncomfortable and you don't feel like you don't wake up some mornings and go, what the hell am I doing? Why shouldn't I should just be working 9 to 5. I should just be doing like, if you're not feeling that on some days, you don't want to feel it every day because that's not healthy. That means you're probably running a really bad business.
Yeah.
But if you're not feeling that every once in a while, like we just went so big on this, we just bought 200 barrels. What are we doing? And then you're like, okay, in 3, 4, 5, 10 years, these will pay off. And I just think there's a lot to say for expanding yourself and pushing yourself. Your turnaround for your investment is longer than most businesses. It's insane.
If most businesses, theoretically, I think I remember this from business schools, like you should be showing a profit in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
At best.
Yeah.
My barrels aren't even worth anything for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Anything. I mean, basically.
What kind of business are they talking about? Like Legos or something?
I have no idea. But to your point, that's the thing is like, if you wake up in the morning, whatever, every day or whatever, and say, this is cool. I can still actively say every day that I've woken up, I might be frustrated from time to time, be like, why isn't this, like, why am I not further than I thought I would be, for example? Right. But I can also turn around and say, I love what I do.
And you're 32.
I have freedom.
Yeah,
absolutely. I have freedom to play. And I think that's the cost. You know, my father was an entrepreneur and he always built his own businesses and from whatever they were. He always said the same thing. He'd always say, I'm not buying the $1 million house down the road, which I mean, it's pretty average anymore. So I guess
it means a box. No, I'm just kidding. It's more than a box. I'm not trying to play into that whole thing.
I've seen the memes on Instagram.
You can get more than something for $1 million in Bellingham, but anyways, memes. Yeah, for sure.
His point was I'm buying my freedom. Now you might work more hours than a 9 to 5. That's certainly for sure. Yeah. I mean, I work a lot, but I have a really good time doing it. And honestly, it's the connections that I make with people that I actually love the most out of it.
Yep.
I love the products. I love what I do. It's the connections I get to meet. It's like this.
This is great.
Right here, which is wonderful. And I get to meet people, for example, all over the world. That's how I bring in Pinot de Charente casks or sherry casks or French oak or casks from Isle of Scotland. Like, it's crazy.
It's the good stuff.
You can't go down the street and buy these barrels. It doesn't exist. It's like, how do you make these connections over time and build trust with each other?
Yep.
More often than not, my business is a handshake more than it's a contract.
Yeah.
That's not very, I feel like that's kind of unheard of anymore.
It's old school, but old school is good.
Old school works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of the time.
So,
yeah.
Speaking of which, yes. Yeah, we're blood brothers. We did it. Yeah. So we're going to try another one.
That, though.
We're going to do another one.
Yeah.
And this one is also at Hagen.
Yes.
And other retailers.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about this as I pour this.
Yeah, totally. This is Doc Swinson's triple cask, bourbon finished in cognac and sherry casks. You can find this at Hagen. You can find this at Total Wine & More. You can find this in 27 states technically right now, which is great. This was actually our flagship whiskey we put out in 2020 to follow up what we were working on for the first 3 years of our own company. So once again, we were primarily funding this operation through the excess profits from doing private label contracting, right? Which is, it's good. Pays our wages, right? Plus a little extra. What we want to do, because we weren't distilling the grains ourselves, we wanted to not just buy barrels from a big distillery in the Midwest and dump them and put them in a bottle and call it ours. That was not the goal. We wanted to create something that was unique by blending these different profiles together. And I think the easiest way to describe this is a chef generally doesn't grow the food, doesn't rear the cattle, maybe in some cases, but it's pretty uncommon. They work with people they like working with. We do no different. We are the chefs. We work with suppliers that we trust. We like the products. We bring them in and we create something new dish out of it, right? And that's what these products are. Originally, when we first started Doc Swinson's, it was experimental at best, right? It was playing around with all these different profiles from sherry casks to Madeira casks. Yep. Cheers. What really helped launch our brand, which was kind of a godsend, so to speak, was I had access to some 15-year-old Kentucky bourbon. So this was 2019 to 2020. It was a time when there wasn't a lot of age-statement whiskeys on the market, right? And all of a sudden, we dropped in one of the first 15-year-old bourbons that you could possibly find on the market. We dropped it into about a half a dozen strategic states. So this is one of those or situations where luck was on our side.
And that was this bottle.
That was our 15-year Kentucky bourbon.
Gotcha.
Now, that was like a $200 bottle of bourbon, right? It was expensive. And that's because the inputs were extremely expensive. We put it out, and all of a sudden went gangbusters. So all of a sudden, Doc Swinson's became a name in all the whiskey nerd Reddit situations across the country, which was
shout out to Reddit. Yes. My goodness.
So thank you, Reddit. Also, whiskey nerds, you're amazing. I'm one of them too. So fair enough, right? And so here's the thing is, though, we were running out of that. You can't live off of 15-year-old Kentucky juice forever because it doesn't exist, right? It's hard to find. So how do we follow it up with another spirit? Probably about a third of its age. Mm-hmm. That's what this is. How do we showcase something that's unique to us? And that was taking American whiskeys, blending them, and finishing with different casks. A category in the United States that was just growing, which is finished whiskey. Don't be afraid of it. Seriously, it's one of the coolest things in the world. It's how do we do what people do in Scotland or Ireland, right? Here in the United States with American whiskey. And honestly, I think it's more approachable, right?
I mean, Scotch is, for me, we had this conversation about, you said, what kind of whiskey do you like? And I said, well, I'd say bourbon, whiskey, then Scotch. And I would throw Japanese whiskey in there. I like Japanese whiskey too.
But it's all different ball games.
But it's also, Japanese whiskey is great when you're like at sushi and like it's the experience, but also it does taste similar to Scotch to me.
Yep.
It's very similar to me to Scotch.
It's a rip-off of Scotch, and that's where Japanese distillers learned it from, right?
Right.
It's made in very similar practices, but it's typically lighter in profile because it fits the culture.
Right.
Better, especially for sushi.
Yep. And you throw like Irish whiskey in there too. Solid for me, but the bourbon for me has always been number one. And you said, I want you to try something. And I tried it, and it was I think it was this bottle.
Yeah, Reefer Madness here at a humorous name. We like to name our stuff sometimes uniquely. That's a different ball game.
It's a different ball game. Tastes a little bit like Scotch, but it is not Scotch.
Right. It's blending American whiskey and the most polarizing American whiskey being rye whiskey with another polarizing American spirit, rum, and peated Scotch quarter casks from Islay. Like, these are completely different worlds. Things that normally I think you would look at and say, this will never work. And that's Reefer Madness, which was a limited release.
Yep.
It's one of the more harebrained releases of ours, right? So all the white labels are limited editions. Like, I may make them once, I may make them again. It just depends on what kind of cask I could bring over that I'm looking for, right?
You literally handed this to me and said, this is weird. Give it a shot.
Yep.
And
these are things I live for, right?
Yeah.
It's unique. It's strange. I've never seen a barrel or a product like this ever on the market. Ever.
How does it make you feel as a blender, as a master blender, when you create something that you're like, I don't know, this doesn't taste like anything that I've tasted before?
It's fun to create something first because there's no predetermined understanding of what it should taste like. I think that's something that's really difficult about the industry in general is if you believe something should taste like bananas.
This one tastes like chocolate to me, by the way.
This one, yeah, which makes sense. That's primarily the cask profile in conjunction with Pedro Jimenez sherry, which is the heaviest part of the blend.
Good job,
you're right on,
caveman.
Seriously.
Good job, Simple Caveman.
Stay simple, caveman. Honestly, you'll be happier for it. I know some flavor scientists that literally could pick out faults in Gatorade. That's a whole nother level.
They're not living life. No.
Anyways, chocolate is a huge, I would say, a very predominant characteristic in triple cask, Doc Swinson's triple cask. So to follow up with that 15-year, this is what I put out in the market to say, hey, we're not just Doc Swinson's that found whiskey and did a really good job of putting a 15-year bourbon out. We're Doc Swinson's that knows what we're doing when it comes to maturation and finishing. A category that was really new in 2020, right? Now, there are other companies that have done it for significantly longer, but it was still like, it was very cuspy, right?
Was there a spike during COVID of whiskey drinking?
Oh my gosh. Just like all alcohol, just like prohibition, alcohol went through the roof.
Society was in good shape at that time.
I mean, it depends on what side of the coin here.
We're doing great. We're just fine. Yeah, we're out of it.
Honestly, I think one of the most interesting things about COVID in particular and drinking at home was, and no offense to bars, I love bars.
Yeah.
But I think the neat thing was people got to explore more in a way that they could actually understand what's happening. They got to experiment more with what different flavor profiles they got to play with. And I think that was the first point in time in particular American consumers to say, I want to experience what these different profiles taste like and why. One reason why finishing, I think, would really benefit in finish cask. People have never tried Pinot de Chiron. People have never tried what French oak tastes like or sherry cask tastes like. People don't know that stuff here. I think this is a renaissance in flavor profiles. This is a food renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like we've been doing this for the last decade in the United States as far as flavors in general. Like, this is why cooking shows are so big. That's why there's celebrity chefs in this world, is we get to bring those people into play. We're just doing it in whiskey. That's just our medium.
I love that.
And I think that's really cool. That's special, right? And it doesn't seem to be going anywhere, right? Even though more people are drinking at bars, we're finding now bars are more interested in finished casks.
See, I'm going to bars less and less. It has nothing to do with having a kid. I just don't go to bars as often. But I actually enjoy it a lot more. It's almost like going to the movie theater versus like watching a movie at home in your sweatpants with the heater on and eating some food and having some whiskey. And that, to me, that's what going to a bar is like versus buying a bottle and enjoying it on your own.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you want to lay back and fall asleep during that movie, right?
Totally.
That's the benefit of having a bottle at home.
Absolutely.
But sometimes you want to go to the theater. Absolutely.
Can we shift back to whiskey nerds?
Absolutely.
We touched on it briefly. You're a whiskey nerd. I'm a whiskey. I'm getting there. Tell me about your different fanatics, because you've got the people, and I'm going to keep using Jason or Jesse, not Jesse Nelson or Overflow, because you are a whiskey nerd. We established that, but also some of the guys that we brought, to the tour. Tell me about those people and what they look for, and then what everybody else, your other fans, because you have fans of all different walks of life that like different types of bottles for different reasons and different seasons. That rhymed. So tell me more about those people. Who are your customers and who are your fans?
I think it actually spans to your point, right? It spans quite a few different people. So there are whiskey nerds, diehard whiskey nerds. And for the record, I'm actually not one of them. I love them. I'm not one of them. I'm a barrel nerd first and foremost. That's really my passion, is how do I manipulate products? What I've realized is there are a lot of whiskey nerds that understand that and like that as well, but they seem to be more interested in for example, the processing or the story, which is something we have a lot of. We showcase a lot of that. That's something that I don't share quite the same. I don't hunt bottles, I'll be honest. I do not go out and hunt bottles. Every once in a while, if I come across a bottle I really love, I'll pick one up. And that's mostly because I'm more curious about, how does this affect my whiskeys? How does this affect a whiskey in general? Or how did this producer make something in this fashion? Like, how do they get it to layer that way? And that, I think, is a little bit different from the typical whiskey nerd, which I think is more or less trying unique things and saying this is how it's made and understanding that whole process and showcasing that to other people. I think we do things a little bit differently. Overall, I think the whiskey nerds that I tend to meet the most, some of my favorite people in the world, are looking for new experiences. They want to say, hey, I know and understand how the process of this manufacturing worked out to produce this profile. Whether that's a finish cask, a mash bill, yeast, type of distillation, etc. And then you have more people who are just like interested in whiskey, for example, or are learning. I think what that comes down to is more or less, do I like it? Do I not?
Right.
What could I use it in? What shouldn't I use it in? I think that kind of is that the question, right? That was like defining more or less like what we all see and what we're all kind of looking for. So for example, the one we're drinking right now, triple cask, right, is our number one seller. It's approachable. It showcases an extreme amount of complexity. But if you don't understand what to look for, it's really good. You don't have to look if you don't want to. Whereas some of the other whiskeys I make probably want to push that boundary and say, this is what I'm looking for. And that might be smoke. That might be apricots.
Banana.
Like that.
You know?
Exactly. Banana. Exactly. So I think it just depends on what you walk into. And the reality is there's no wrong answer, right? If there's something you like, go for it.
Yeah, that answered that question, and I fall into that category. And that's actually how I think this was the first bottle I bought. So
Still our best seller.
it is. It's delicious, and this is delicious, and these are all delicious. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. And I appreciate that I found it in the store.
Yeah, thanks for picking it up. Honestly, that's how we continue as a company, is like consumers that are willing to try new things. At the very beginning of your adventure into whiskey is you were looking, I imagine you were at a store and you're like, well, what do I buy?
Yeah.
Well, this was interesting. This sounds cool.
It's-
Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to actually hear what that is for you. But what made you pick up Doc Swinson's over all the other bottles in a liquor store at that period of time?
Well, real estate is a very interesting business where some days are great and everything's in flow, and some days your hair is on fire the entire day. And so this was actually a really good day. This was a really good day in real estate. I felt like
be associated with that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you don't want to associate with bad days, but yeah, I was, I was in a particular time in my life where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try a new bottle every month. And I'm pretty slow.
That's cool.
And sometimes I really like it. So I'll have it a couple nights in a row and go through a little bit faster. But yeah, anyways, I've been going into Hagen because I found that they had a really great whiskey selection. Whoever procures their whiskey does a really good job. I just would like browse. I just look around probably for longer than I should. I'm there for like 25 minutes and I'm just like, I've heard of that one. Oh, that looks cool. Yeah, it looks cool. And I always end up in the local section because I'm a big proponent of like, I'll always try something if it's local.
Mhm.
But if something's local and good,
Right.
then I'm a big fan. I'll go all in on it. And so I stood there in front of the local shelf, and I'm a very visual person. So I was like, yeah, I like it looks kind of like a Prohibition bottle. That's cool. I like that. It had the prescription on the front. I was like, I'm kind of prescribing myself a celebration right now. And then I was like, I think there was 2 or 3 different options, two options. I'm sure the $35 bottle is good, but I'm going to start with something that I think is like a little bit higher price point,
Mhm.
because I think that this will give me a good entry point, and then I can try the other one if I just like the whiskey in general.
Totally.
And then I bought it, and then I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And then I just started running my mouth because I'm a hype man, and I was like, hey, I got you a bottle. Hey, you should try this. Hey, let's do this. And then that's how we got to this point where we're sitting here right now.
It's awesome.
That's
It's
it.
amazing. I mean,
I'm simple. I'm a simple guy.
simple's good. I mean, honestly, I'm pretty straightforward when it comes down to it. I mean, most people think it's all about layering all these flavors, and it is about layering flavors. But once again, it comes down to, do you like it or not?
Yeah.
And why do you like it? And that's when it gets more complicated if you want to. But the reality is, you're my favorite fan, to be totally honest with you. And that's because you are a hype guy. And the reality is, there's a lot of people that are out there. And once again, whiskey nerds are hype people. And no matter what part of that whiskey nerddom you're part of, right? Whether you're just starting out or not or whatever, and how you like it. Maybe you like cocktails more, maybe you like straight whiskey more. Doesn't really matter. If you like it, you're more than likely to talk about it, right? And that's my goal, is to give you and all the other consumers out there is an excellent introduction, at the very least, to American whiskey and what American whiskey could be as well, which is really cool because there's a lot of us out there that get a lot of flack for finishing whiskeys. That was the thing 3, 4, 5 years ago. People didn't do that. It was weird. The only reason why you do that is because you had bad whiskey. The reality, that's not the case at all. And we're proving that because more and more people are interested in finished whiskeys, because it crosses the boundaries of what is typical of American whiskey by adding in flavor profiles that we all know and love. And maybe that's from our past families, or maybe we're from different cultures. There's all sorts of crossovers here. These are transitions that I think are really cool and we can grow with.
Yep.
And that very experience that you had is, once again, it's what helps our brand grow. We're teeny.
Yep.
We're here. We're doing a lot of amazing things. It just takes a community to continue that.
So speaking of teeny, before we wrap this up, let's talk about awards. Yeah. Teeny awards, teeny whiskey awards. No, huge awards, lots of awards.
Yeah.
What does that mean to win a whiskey award on a national or world scale?
Sure.
What are some of the awards that you're most proud of with your whiskey blending?
Well, that's a great question. So it's actually something we've been talking about more recently, as you can go and find any company that has, 10, 20, 30, 40 awards. We've won this, we've won that. It's something that I think we've prided ourselves on for a long time, is being selective about the award bodies that award those awards, right? That actually align with more or less our morals, right? What I mean by that is simply, anybody could create an award body and say, hey, submit to us. You pay for these things, for the record, right? Like, you were actively paying a price to be a part of this community, right? This award body. And that's mostly because they have to pay judges to show up, and they usually have to pay for whatever their hospitality is.
I mean, we're in real estate. We understand that
Exactly.
pay to be on the front of a magazine, top real estate agent in the world or like in the galaxy.
I mean,
That's one that I haven't gotten yet.
it'll come soon.
Yeah.
In Whatcom County.
Yeah, we're
as far as Distiller's Way goes, or Doc Swinson goes, you've got ours.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to probably expand our brokerage to the moon next. We're going to skip going, Skagit County. We're going to go straight to the moon.
Bring them in.
Yeah.
Might work in some really interesting areas. Anyways, no, so as far as award body goes, I think something we've done for a long time is specifically understand each and every award body that we actually submit to. So I think that's something that's different about us compared to some of it, is you can just keep submitting and winning awards. When we say we won over 130 awards in less than 36 months, what we mean by that is those are awards that we believed in the award process that company does. So for example, some of the oldest ones, the most recognizable ones are San Francisco Spirit Awards, for example, right? It's an excellent group. Beverage Tasting Institute, New York Spirit Awards, there's dozens of them out there. And what we want to make sure is we understand that they have a definitive judging process, not just submit your stuff and we'll just tell you what we think.
Yeah.
That's a different profile. That's a different company. So what we want to do is understand exactly what they're doing and how they go about it, who they're working with, because we think that actually makes a difference, right? We don't just want an award. It doesn't help us. We already know what our whiskey tastes like. We want to know what other people actually believe in, what they actually think. So when it comes down to winning awards, we submit our products to specific award bodies and see what they say, right? And those ones have very definitive processes behind judging products. And to be fair, they're judging thousands of products at a given point in time. That could be across several different categories, whiskey, vodkas, gins, etc. When we submit a whiskey like this to those awards, we put the faith in them to actually say, this is what's good and this is what is not, based upon decades of usually experience. And I think the ones that we've won for Doc Swinson's that have impacted our company the most is San Francisco Spirit Awards. We've won, for example, best in category, best finished whiskey in the world, which is pretty big. That's like basically winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
In our category, right? Which is insane. That's what we focus on. So of the hundreds of brands doing that, we've now been in the top 3 and or the number 1 multiple years in a row. That's a hard thing to achieve out of thousands of whiskeys that are submitted. So you can imagine as a judge trying thousands of whiskey and saying, oh, this one's still on top.
And being able to walk home after that too.
Luckily, they usually have hotels.
Nice, good. Okay,
right there where they're doing the tasting. They shuttle everybody in. I think that's why we have to pay, and like they get room aboard. Another one that I think was really cool, specifically with the product we just recently tried, Triple Cask. It's done really well across all award bodies we submit to, but one in particular is Cigar and Spirit Magazine.
Okay.
So if you're a cigar aficionado, if it's your thing, this is one of the only legacy award-winning products in almost 20 years to actually be considered a legacy award winner. So there's about 10 products in general that covers rums, gins, vodkas, whiskeys, cognacs, you name it. And this one in particular is one of 3 American whiskeys to ever win it.
It's a big deal.
Which is crazy.
Which is why more people in Whatcom County are going to start drinking this. More whiskey drinkers in Whatcom County.
I hope so.
You're hearing it here. People know about you. Don't get me wrong.
I'm learning that. So this is kind of a new thing for us, is to focus on Whatcom County, to be totally honest.
It's in all, like a lot of retail stores here locally. Hagen specifically is where I found it. They can buy it online, correct?
Yes, you can buy it online through our website. That's docswhiskey.com. But honestly, one of the best ways, if you were local, is one, we're working on a tasting room. So hopefully spring, early summer, we'll have a tasting room open that you can actually show up to. Shoot us an email.
Yeah.
info@docswhiskey.com. Say, hey, I've got a bunch of friends. I want to come check out what you guys do. I want to do a tasting. We'll set one up with you. No problem.
Yeah, we had a blast.
It's actually really fun. Yeah,
we had a great super fun. If you're listening to this right now, you should go do this. We actually did this as the Building Bellingham preview, and we had a good time. There will be a Live Bellingham Now preview or business highlight coming out as well, because there was so much good content. And I just appreciate you and your commitment to your craft as a master blender. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate you. And I've just appreciated this entire experience, getting to know you better. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is episode 7 of season 200. Just kidding. Season 5. Thank you for listening. Jesse, thank you for joining me and sharing your passion for whiskey.
Yeah. Thanks, dude. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, man. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah.
Building Bellingham is a community podcast exploring leadership, challenges, failure, and mindset with entrepreneurs right here in Whatcom County, Washington. You can be the first to hear about upcoming guests by subscribing to the Building Bellingham Facebook or Instagram pages, as well as the Building Bellingham YouTube channel. This episode was produced and edited by Tiffany Holden. Our videography is done by Cooper Hansley. Community projects are by Taylor Beal. To learn more about the team behind the podcast and to download our media kit, check out our website at www.livebellinghamnow.com or search Cohen Group NW on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn. From the whole Building Bellingham podcast team, thank you for listening.